There were, as you probably know, dramatic scenes in the Dáil last night when Fine Gael TD for Dublin Fingal, Alan Farrell, stood up and named Sinn Féin TDs Dessie Ellis and Martin Ferris in association with the 1983 murder of prison officer Brian Stack. Alan Farrell's intervention came directly after Sinn Féin President Gerry Adams, he's also of course a TD for Louth, had made a statement to the Dáil on the murder. In a few minutes we'll hear from the former Justice Minister and former Attorney General indeed, Micheál McDowell, now of course a Senator. But first with me here in studio, the Fianna Fáil leader, Micheál Martin. I should point out, by the way, that we did ask for Gerry Adams to come on the show this morning. We also asked for Deputy Ellis or Deputy Ferris, or both indeed. And then we asked for any spokesperson at all from Sinn Féin, but so far nobody has been made available. This drama followed Sinn Féin leader Gerry Adams' statement. Now let's just remind ourselves of some of what he had to say.
In 2013, Austin gave me the names of 4 people who he believes may have information on the case. He told me he had been given these names by journalistic and Garda sources. Now Austin denies giving me names. Why on earth would I say I received the names from him if I didn't? In February of this year, Austin Stack also claimed that he gave the names to the Fianna Fáil leader, Micheál Martin. So if Austin Stack was prepared to give names to Mr Martin, why would he not have given them to me? I was, after all, the person he was asking to arrange a meeting.
And that was some of Gerry Adams' statement in Dáil Éireann last evening. Micheál Martin, as I say, is with me in studio. Thank you indeed for coming in. Now, there's obviously a very strong, there are polar opposite recollections on the part of Gerry Adams and Austin Stack on whether Adams was given the names by Mr Stack. But did Austin Stack give you names of people who might have been helpful in this investigation?
Well, about 2.5 years afterwards, or 2 years after, he gave names to Gerry Adams. And by the way, in the note that Gerry Adams releases yesterday, there's only 2 names allegedly was given, although Austin Stack says he gave no names. It's interesting, Gerry Adams gave 4 names to the Garda Commissioner, whereas in fact by his own minute it talks about 2 names. Austin Stack would have updated me in relation to the investigation into the murder of his father by the IRA, and in that context, names certainly were mentioned.
So of
people who had been interviewed, and in terms of the investigation.
You've seen I presume you've seen the email that Gerry Adams sent to the Garda Commissioner that's in wide circulation. Alan Farrell said it was in the public domain on the basis of 3 TDs having it, but
I didn't have it.
Are you aware of its contents?
I'm aware of its contents,
okay.
But I was aware obviously from the Irish Independence coverage of it.
Yes,
at the time.
And 2 of those names are now publicly named in the Dáil. Are those names and the other 2 with whom you would be familiar, are they the names that you got as well?
Well, I think we've been extremely careful, Sean, in terms of going into names. There's a live investigation on the way, and I've done nothing to date that would in any way undermine or harm that particular investigation. And the name of Dessie Ellis is one that didn't circulate, as far as I can see, and there was some surprise that he was included in any list, but that's a matter for Gerry Adams.
That's not a name that was given to you by Mr Stack?
Absolutely not. I'm not saying any other names were either. I'm not going to comment on names.
But he did give you names?
He indicated to me, and he updated me in terms of his understanding of where the case was and people that could be that were involved.
Yeah.
And I mean, it is like, just to let the listener, in the toing and froing of counterclaim and claim, the bottom line here is that the only prison officer in this state was murdered by the provisional IRA. It was a heinous, savage crime. The people are still at large, and I think there is an obligation on those who know about that murder to ensure that those people are brought to justice, because it was an attack on the institutions of this state. That is the bottom line here.
Yes, and also, and this has been driven, if you like, into the public arena. I think primarily by the Stack family. They want to know what happened to their father. But I just want to go back a little bit to Gerry Adams' statement, where he's setting the context in which he was approached by the Stack family, and he wanted, as he said, he was approached in 2013 seeking an acknowledgement for what had happened to the Stack to Mr Stack Senior, and here's his description of what he did by way of helping them, as he recalled.
I told the Stack brothers that I could only help on the basis of confidentiality. That was the same basis on which I have tried to help and to assist other families. Both Austin and Oliver agreed to respect the confidential nature of the process we were going to try to put in place. Without that commitment, I could never have pursued the meeting they were seeking, which took place later that summer. The brothers were given a statement at that meeting by a former IRA leader. That statement was made available publicly by the Stack family. The statement acknowledged that the IRA was responsible for their father's death, that it regretted it took so long to clarify this for them, that the shooting of Brian Stack was not authorised by the IRA leadership, and that the person who gave the instruction was disciplined.
Now, there's an awful lot in that people will find very unsatisfactory. But nevertheless, isn't it just the reality of the situation, Micheál Martin, that the only basis on which Adams could help the Stack family was on the basis of confidentiality?
I don't accept that, Sean. I don't buy the cloak around which Gerry Adams had to cloak himself yesterday in terms of the peace process and the confidentiality issue and all of that, because he gave 4 names subsequently to the Garda Commissioner. He says that in that statement, which obviously you can't go through his entire statement, and he said yesterday in the Dáil, I made it clear to the Garda Commissioner that I have no information on the death of Brian Stack. The email was sent only after I'd spoken to 3 of the 4. There's a live Garda investigation. I'm prepared to cooperate with this. Those are the words of Gerry Adams yesterday in the Dáil. That's not a true statement. He does have information in relation to the death of Brian Stack because he was there at a meeting with the IRA leader who told the sons of Brian Stack and Gerry Adams, that not only had the IRA carried out this and they denied it for 30 years, but they actually had disciplined the guy who gave the instruction.
Yeah, but
the point is, he can say in Dáil Éireann yesterday, Sean, that he has no information. He has.
Well, you don't know. For instance, Ona Murphy was making the point last night on Late Debate Adams may not even have known the identity of the person to whom he brought the Stack.
But does Ona Murphy really believe that? Do you believe it? I can't put you in that position, but I don't believe that. No, but my point is, Sean, okay, accept that point, okay? What Gerry Adams does know is that he knows somebody who he described to the Stacks as a trusted friend and confidant. He knows that person, and he knows that person has key knowledge about the murder of Brian Stack. Yet he comes into the Dáil and says he has no information to give the Garda Commissioner. And by the way, in the note that was revealed yesterday again, he alerts, apparently it's in the Sinn Féin record of the meeting, that Gerry Adams was advised legally that he shouldn't get into this process because he might not give information to the Garda Commissioner and he could be accused of withholding cooperation. Bingo, that's exactly the point. And Gerry Adams has withheld that key information that would lead to would be of enormous assistance to the Gardaí in getting to the bottom of this crime.
Again, to quote Ona Murphy, the demand here is that Gerry Adams play a role in bringing former IRA leaders before the courts. The whole peace process being based on the idea that we've moved beyond a position of conflict.
Gerry Adams repeatedly in Leinster House wants to bring others to justice for crimes. He constantly asks Enda Kenny to meet a particular group that were wronged. And I have no difficulty, by the way, with seeking justice on the Finucane case and other cases. That is legitimate part of the Good Friday Agreement, where they want those who committed those crimes brought to justice and made culpable. That is true and that is correct. But you can't have it both ways.
No, but I mean, but what do you say? I mean, you see, the thing is, in making peace, the government of which you were a member for 13 years, was it?
Yes.
Or longer, 14 years, you had to hold your nose in agreeing to certain things, like the release of prisoners, people who had done the most dreadful things, including indeed the murder of Jerry McCabe. Ultimately, they were released. Because why? It had to be done.
Hold on a second. The people involved in Jerry McCabe were not released in the context of the Good Friday Agreement, by the way. And in no way was any attempt made to suggest that they should never be brought to justice. No one has immunity from crimes committed during the Troubles, Sean. No one has immunity. And no one is free. There are many live investigations underway in relation to murders within, during this period of conflict and so on. And in terms of the Republic and the murder of a prison officer, the only prison officer, are people seriously suggesting that there should be no legitimate pursuit of those who carried out that crime? That the IRA who claim, and their colleagues in Sinn Féin, including Gerry Adams, knowingly denied this for 30 odd years.
Isn't an awful lot of this what's going on now? Isn't it basically targeting Sinn Féin, the old Lyndon Baines Johnson thing? Let's hear the bastards deny it.
No, what it is really is certain families will not go away, and that's the big problem for Sinn Féin. The Stacks didn't go away. That's the problem for Gerry Adams, and there's been various attempts by Sinn Féin to try and manoeuvre families who are awkward for them. Awkward for their political project, and that's the real nub of this. I think there's great courage.
There's great courage to be made by people like you, isn't there?
There's great courage due to Austin Stack, Oliver Stack, and these people who have the perseverance to keep at this, and there was other families have done it as well in terms of crimes that were committed against their loved ones, and that's the problem for Sinn Féin. We have a responsibility and an obligation to point this up. Sinn Féin is very adept at attacking others. Attacking the integrity of others.
They may well be, others. But I mean, do you honestly think that there is any prospect whatsoever that Gerry Adams can have people brought before the courts on for that crime committed 33 years ago?
Well, he gave 4 names. Why?
Because he was under pressure, he says, from people like you and in Fine Gael during an election, because you saw it as a means
I didn't even know he gave them. But I didn't even know he gave them.
But he gave them because you were being attacked. He was being attacked in regard to the Brian Stack.
But he didn't tell
murder.
anybody during the election that he was giving names to anybody. He didn't tell anybody he was doing this. Now, I suspect that he did it to cover his back.
I think that's perfectly
by the way,
plausible.
He has said it himself, which is very disingenuous, by the way, and dishonest way to do things as well. And he more or less says, for the avoidance of doubt, he said yesterday in the Dáil, I take that as code for uncovering my back here. I'm not sincere about this.
Yeah, but look,
he's either sincere about wanting to cooperate with the Gardaí.
Certain political realities have to be accepted, like, for instance, the fact that Gerry Adams will never admit to being a member of the IRA.
I don't accept that political reality, Sean. Sorry. He's a participant in a parliamentary democracy in the Republic. He either plays by the rules of that parliamentary democracy or he doesn't. He can't live in a parallel universe.
So what do you want to do? Spend the next 10 years going around rounding up former provos?
He cannot expect different sets of rules of accountability than any other party leader in Leinster House or any other TD or senator in the Oireachtas. He can't expect that. And it's just not on that he would behave in that manner, in my opinion.
You're a historian by academic training. You've written about sort of stirring times in your own part of the world. I mean, how helpful would it have been, or might it have been, in the 1950s if people were constantly dragging up the events of the 1920s in the Dáil? Well, that's what you're doing now, or say what other people are doing now.
I'm not doing it. Like, remember how this happened. The Stack family want to know who murdered their dad. That's where this begins and ends. That's it. A distinguished, loyal servant of the state who was murdered in unacceptable circumstances. That's it. And I think there's an onus on parliamentary members of the parliamentary
yes, but I mean,
parties
go back. I mean, what were the prospects? Go back to the 1950s. What were the chances of people, RIC men, perfectly upstanding servants of this state, who were murdered, shot in their beds by your forebears in the Fianna Fáil party, and indeed people in other parties as well? I mean, what would have been the point of doing all that or bringing that up when you're trying to go forward with a peace process, with nation building? And where is all this going to get us? Well,
I think where it has to get us is proper accountability in the first place, establishing the rule of law, basic rules of law, where murder occurs in this state, that people are made accountable. I don't buy. Are you suggesting that the murder of Brian Stack was somehow part of some political conflict, and you equate that with? I don't think it was. I don't think it's in any shape or form. And let me say this: the attempts by the IRA to demonise Brian Stack is a further compounding of the appalling. But I just say, I mean, in the biography that Martin Ferris writes, he describes him as a cruel and vindictive man. He was anything but the sort. And likewise, in the IRA statement that they gave to the Stack sons, the IRA say, there was terrible cruelty visited upon the prisoners and their families. That was the context in which your father was killed. That's adding insult to injury. In other words, there was a context. There was no bloody context. The only context I could see is they were planning a breakout of Portlaoise prison, and Mr. Stack was getting in the way of that.
Do you accept what was said by way of an admission, insofar as it went, that it wasn't authorised and it shouldn't have happened?
I don't. I think the IRA authorised it, and I like the language. It was wrong. That's the kind of language Sinn Féin trot out. It was horrible. It was savage. and deserves to be condemned. It's not just wrong and move on, please.
Yeah, I'm recalling something that Albert Reynolds used to say. He said it to me directly, having met John Major at a very stormy meeting in the margins of a European summit prior to the Downing Street Declaration. And Major had thrown the book at him over Adams carrying the coffin of the Shankill Road bomber. And Albert said, look, I had to explain to him, if Adams didn't carry that coffin, he could have been in the next one himself.
Yeah, look.
And you're not going to get perfection. When it came to sending somebody across to explain the ceasefire to the States, he said, I can't send a saint. We had to send Joe Cahill or give him the visa.
Sean, I don't need lectures.
But I'm just wondering, do you have to keep dragging them back to these events, which you know very well are not going to be resolved in the courts?
Well, I don't know very well.
Or is there just a political convenience to it?
I don't know very well that they won't be resolved in the courts. This could be resolved in the courts. This is a live investigation. Yes, this is a live investigation. People have been questioned.
And do you think Gerry Adams has the evidence that could cause it or could lead it to being solved?
He certainly has the pathway to that particular individual that he brought the sons to see, the sons of Brian Stack to see, who has the information.
Is this not a case of it being
something
something
that he has that information?
Enormously.
Would you accept that?
I don't know.
Well, sure,
I don't know whether Mr. Adams has that information.
No, but he has access to the individual who said...
in the same way he has access or had access to the Army Council to persuade them. And there was this great fiction and everybody had to go along with it in politics to get to the peace.
And there's a level of that, by the way.
And you want to go back to all that now and start picking over the scabs again. Isn't that what this is about?
Well, actually, the more you learn about murders like this, you begin to learn how sordid and seedy a lot of this was in terms of how the IRA went about its business.
Oh, for sure.
And how a lot of it had absolutely nothing to do with freeing Ireland or liberating anybody. And that those people involved in that kind of activity deserve to be brought to justice and shouldn't be hidden by anything. Process.
Are you saying that none of this has anything to do with the intense rivalry between you and Mr. Adams' party?
Again, I didn't initiate this.
No, but it just conveniently arose for you as something to,
run with
the political ball.
A journalist in the Irish Independent got hold of the email. I don't know how, but all journalists are, right? Just hear me out. And the Stack brothers, as I said earlier, the Stack brothers, like other families who've been hurt by the provisional IRA, just didn't go away.
What did you think?
That's why this issue is where we are. It's not because I didn't initiate this
What did
issue.
you think of the naming of the two Sinn Féin TDs, Deputy Ferris and Deputy Ellis, by Alan Farrell, the Fine Gael TD in the Dáil?
I'm uncomfortable with naming people in the Dáil in that manner. And I have to be careful of what I say here, because I think what Alan Farrell said was he was saying the other people who were mentioned in the email might want to speak. And that's what he actually said. So he didn't accuse anyone of being anything other than that. But at the same time, in the context...
Was it not a classic smear?
In the context of an investigation and so on like that, I think one has to be extremely careful and cautious in the utilisation of names and using Dáil privilege in that regard. Just as I would have equally, by the way, condemned Mary Lou MacDonald, who very cynically named names in Leinster House without any foundation.
Is there an equivalence between naming somebody...
And I was found to have abused her privilege in Leinster House.
Is there an equivalence between naming somebody as a holder of an Ansbacher account and associating somebody with a murder?
There's not
on the basis that they have information that can help.
In terms of degrees, murder is obviously the worst, one of the worst crimes. But Alan Farrell is very clear that, and you see, you can.
If one of your TDs came and asked you, what do you think? I'm thinking of doing this, Micheál, or leader.
No, I would not name names in terms of a live investigation.
You would have counselled and directed that TD not to.
I would not have used names or
approved of one of your TDs using.
No, I wouldn't actually. No, I'd be clear about the use. I think Dáil privilege is a very, very sort of sacred privilege that deputies have, and it's got to be jealously protected and guarded. But Sinn Féin have not been the best exponents of that either.
Stay with us if you can, if you have the time. I'd like to ask you about the opinion poll in a few minutes, but I want to go to Michael McDougall. Senator McDougall, good morning to you.
Good morning.
And thank you for coming on the programme, and thank you for staying with us. What did you think of what Alan Farrell did in the Dáil yesterday?
Well, I was just reading the account of it and listening there to Micheál, and I agree with him that what he actually asked was whether the two individuals who he named should take the opportunity to make a personal statement themselves on the implication that they were the people named in the Adams email. I don't think that's an abuse of Dáil privilege, to be honest with you. I think that charges across the House are normally made in by means of a substantive motion. But I don't believe that there was anything unlawful about it or unconstitutional about it.
Was it politically improper?
Well, I mean, what do you mean by that term, politically improper? Clearly, it was a breach of the order of the House because, as I recall, the standing orders of Dáil Éireann, when a deputy is making a personal statement, which I understand Jerry Adams was, he's not entitled to be contradicted or questioned on it, and other members are not entitled to make statements about it. And the use of a point of order to inquire whether the two persons might avail of the opportunity to make personal statements themselves was a bit of an artifice, but it isn't, in my view, an unconstitutional abuse of privilege.
Yeah, I take the point, but I'm just wondering. I mean, like he succeeded, and he sat down with a smirk on his face, reading Miriam Lord in the Irish Times today.
Well, I mean, whether he had a smirk on his face or not, the simple fact is that he did not accuse them of murder, nor did he accuse them of.
No, but I think the word innuendo might apply here.
Yeah,
he linked them to a live investigation.
It might, Sean, and I noticed that the Irish Independent today says that he's connected to the murders, and the Irish Times text of its stories says that this connected them to the murders. I don't necessarily believe that is the case. As I understand it, the IRA having at some level decided to murder Mr. Stack, at a later stage decided to lie about it, and at an even later stage finally came clean, at least to the extent of saying that yes, it had been done by their organisation, and tried to absolve themselves of moral guilt by saying that the person who did it had been disciplined. But you have to remember, Sean, that the IRA was an organisation. There were senior people involved with them. I have named a number of them, both inside and outside the Dáil, with and without privilege, as having been members of the Army Council of the IRA. There were senior people in the IRA who were in charge of its operations north and south of the border. And the fact that it could now be said that somebody has been disciplined meant that there was some kind of inquiry. And that means necessarily that there are people in the IRA who know full well what happened in relation to this, who planned it, who authorised it, and who carried it out.
Of course there are, and you could say that about many hundreds of other murders that remain unsolved on both sides of the border.
But Sean, I listened to your discourse there with Micheál Martin. There is no absolution from murder in the Good Friday Agreement. None whatsoever. And nobody can say, and I mean, I understand the point you're making, that perhaps we wouldn't have made political progress if there had been, everything had been just dealt with as a criminal investigation. I understand that point completely. But nobody has the right to say that by virtue of the Good Friday Agreement, they are unaccountable for the murder of an Irish citizen. None.
Yes,
and that can't be. There's no point in saying, "Oh, let's talk about what happened in the 1950s, and let's talk about what happened in the Civil War, or let's not talk about it." The simple fact is that under the Good Friday Agreement, there is no absolution from murder.
Yeah,
people who murdered other people are liable to be prosecuted in the courts of this state, and people who have knowledge about such murders are liable to be arrested and
do you think it is in any way credible, the idea that Jerry Adams should somehow out people or report people if he has information that can help lead to a conviction?
Credibility. He denies he was a member of the IRA, and he denies he was a member of the IRA Army Council. He was. And I mean, I don't think he has any credibility, to be honest.
Well, when it comes to Jerry Adams' credibility, surely the key thing is.
I heard you saying there to Micheál that we have to live with these myths and these lies. We don't. People should not give credibility to a man who lies to their face. There is no absolution for lying.
The real credibility, surely.
He doesn't have a mandate from history to lie to the people. Micheál Martin doesn't
have
the
people of Louth have had a chance twice to cast their votes and to make their assessment.
But that doesn't change. But
what I'm wondering is, surely the point is.
You could say the same about Charlie Haughey. Look, he was elected again and again and again. or Michael Lowry.
Well, people who voted for him didn't have as much information before the fact as they did after the fact. But in any event,
that frankly is a silly point, Sean.
Oh, absolutely. It is most certainly not a silly point. But let's not digress into it. Well, you're perfectly entitled to think that.
People should be allowed to draw a veil over their past because they've been elected. That doesn't stand up to scrutiny.
No, but people voting in County Louth had far more information about Jerry Adams' past than people in Dublin North Central had when they were voting for Charles Haughey. I think there's no argument about that.
And so what?
Well,
the people of Tipperary have had the.
Okay, look, we're digressing. We're going off.
It does not mean that what was.
No, but surely the whole point and the whole value of Jerry Adams' credibility is the credibility that he had that enabled him to deliver the ceasefire. And to persuade people who perpetrated the most awful.
You're using the term credibility in two different means. If he had a leadership role in the provisional movement, yes. If he could bring that movement with him, yes. But that doesn't mean credibility on issues of truth.
No, but I suppose what I'm really leading to is the point where he says he told the Stack brothers that he could only help on the basis of confidentiality. Well, and that is far from perfect by way of an arrangement. But is it not just the realpolitik?
Well, you can call it realpolitik, but I mean, I was listening carefully to what he said yesterday. He never described this killing as a murder. He said it was a killing and that it was wrong. He never admitted that it was a crime. And the reason, of course, that goes back to the Provo ideology, that anything carried out by the Army Council of the IRA is not a crime. Or anything done under the auspices of the IRA Army Council could not be a crime. Those are the kind of words he uses, and that's the ideology he has. But it doesn't mean, Sean, that we all have to live in the parallel universe, as Micheál Martin said, where black is white, where Jerry Adams wasn't in the IRA because it's politically useful for him at this stage to say he wasn't. I don't live in that universe. RTE, by the way, shouldn't live in that universe either.
I wasn't aware that we were, although it has to be recalled, I suppose, and I might as well do it before somebody else does, that for many years every killing was described as a killing, and we came under ferocious pressure to describe some killings as murders and others not. But anyway, the word murder was generally not used in those reports.
I think the killing of Mr. Stack was a murder, and I think it was a cold-blooded murder, and I think it was almost certainly orchestrated by reference to what he was doing in Portlaoise prison to uphold the security and the integrity of this state. And I believe that the people who carried out his murder and the people who authorised it, in inverted commas, those people were brutal, cold-blooded killers who shot him down at the National Stadium in Dublin as he was coming out of a boxing match. And I don't believe for 1 minute that history absolves them of guilt, and I don't believe that if I had done that, do you think the Sinn Féin deputies in Dáil Éireann would say, "Oh, Michael McDowell should be entitled to some form of confidentiality"? No, they would not.
Michael McDowell, Senator Michael McDowell, thank you indeed for joining us. Back to you, Micheál Martin, briefly, leader of Fianna Fáil. You're looking at your Irish Times upside down. It's on in front of me. The latest opinion poll: Fianna Fáil on 30, up 4. Fine Gael on 27. Are you on track for where you want to go?
I ignore opinion polls, Sean. I don't pay any heed to them. I didn't before the last general election. I don't now. They'll move, they'll shift, and so on. My focus is on the issues that are facing the country at the moment. I gave a long speech yesterday at the Institute of European Affairs on Brexit and the challenge that Brexit represents to us. And that's the kind of focus that I have at the moment. And equally, I've just come from Dunleary, out there with Jennifer Cuff, Kate Feeney, Cormac Devlin, prospective,
young, ambitious, prospective.
You've got it.
Deputies.
And others who were there. So it really is for us. The next poll.
No sign of Mary Hannafin out there, no.
Mary was there, your good friend Mary was
my former deputy.
I'm surprised you hadn't had her in.
Okay, just one other one. I see as well, one thing that's supposed to be encouraging you in this poll that you ignore. You've got a bit of a bounce in Dublin, and it was taken last Monday and Tuesday, just days after the suggestion that Bertie was on his way back to joining the party.
Well, maybe,
any connection between the two?
Well, maybe days after suggestions, after what I had said to Bray. No, I think the polls, we don't give any heed to them. In terms of the individual, we know from experience that before the last general election, the candidates matter, policy matters, and that the actual conduct of a campaign can vary differently to what the polls in advance of a campaign. That's happened in America. It's happened in Britain, and polling is going through a stressful time and a lot of challenges because of demographic.
But even though you ignore
methodologies and so
you're
on
more
like that.
comfortable sitting on 30 than on 26%.
Well, I think it keeps certain people in the party happy.
Okay, look, Micheál Martin, thank you so much for coming in. By the way, I just want to reiterate that invitation to Sinn Féin to give us a spokesman for Mr Adams down. That still stands between now and 12 o'clock, or perhaps even tomorrow. Micheál Martin, thank you. More after the break.
Today with Sean O'Rourke on RTE Radio 1.